Hey everyone! Today around Houston, you'll find thousands of Chinese restaurants. But that wasn't the case in 1969 when Carol Churchill's family opened China Garden, the first ever Chinese restaurant in H-Town. Since then, it's become an institution. But lately, like many restaurants, it's becoming harder and harder to survive. I wanted to play back our interview from earlier this year with Carol to learn about the challenges the industry is facing. It's Wednesday, August 30th, 2023. I'm Raheel Ramzanali, and here's what Houston is talking about. Carol, welcome into CityCast Houston. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Raheel?
I'm doing all right. You know what? It's a good day. You're on CityCast. I'm happy. One of my favorite restaurants in the city of Houston. Before we get to China Garden, I got to ask you, what is your favorite restaurant outside of China Garden in the city that you like to eat at?
I like B&B Butchers.
That's really cool. Let's talk about the history of China Garden, the oldest Chinese restaurant in the city of Houston. How did y'all get started with China Garden?
So my mother and father immigrated from China back in the 60s, and all the children were born in Shreveport, Louisiana.
Oh, wow.
And my dad was working for an uncle, so my mother suggested that we move to Houston because we owed a lot of money to the uncles and whatnot. And so when we got here in 1968 from Shreveport, we had a Chinese food product store, which was at 1119 Jackson at Dallas, which is where the convention center is currently. So after a year of doing the Chinese food product store, Daddy he was in cooking school in Hong Kong. And so my mom said, well, why don't we open a restaurant? And that's where China Garden was born. It was only like a 15-table restaurant. So Daddy was the chef, Mom was the server, and that's how we got rolling.
Oh my gosh. What is your earliest memory of the restaurant?
Very young. We were a family of immigrants and very poor. The children had to wash dishes. We all had to put our, time in. So we just gradually moved up from dishwasher to cutting onions to making fried wontons to actually rolling my finger in a noodle machine. We had our little trials and tribulations, but we worked our way up.
Yeah, that's just like working your way up. That must have been such a valuable life lesson.
It truly was. Hard work goes a long way. Our parents never liked lazy children. So we worked hard, and as a family, we built what we have today.
Nowadays, look, Chinese food and I would say any kind of AAPI food, right? Like it's accepted. We all go there. It's part of our culture. It's part of what makes Houston so great. What were the early days like in terms of reception in the city of Houston for a Chinese restaurant?
We were loved. Ann Criswell, who used to be the food writer for the Chronicle, she loved my dad. She did an article about, at that time in the early 70s, that we were one of the best Chinese restaurants that was new. And she embraced us, and a lot of the council people, like Louis Macy, used to come back then. And there's so many stories to tell how my late mother was loved by all, but Daddy was the quiet one. But Mom she still is loved today and embraced by so many.
Yeah, she really had the spirit of China Garden. Every time you would walk in, Ma was there and she would greet you, and she really made China Garden, and that still continues on today. So it's so good to hear that even in the early days, everyone just appreciated her and her spirit.
Absolutely. And she was just a mom to so many, and if I could learn anything from that, I think a lot of my servers who consider me like the mom now, 3 of them came in that don't work for us anymore. They came in last night and they were like, we just came to say hi. So it was warm.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's really good to hear that the restaurant never experienced any kind of racial hate or any kind of trials and tribulations when it comes to that, right? Is that fair to say?
Fair to say.
So one of the cool things about China Garden, it is part of Toyota Center, right? It's right by the parking garage. I consider it just an extension of Toyota Center because basically for us, that's where the night starts, right? Like you go to China Garden, you get a meal, then you go to Toyota Center and watch a game, concert, wrestling, whatever it is. What was it like before Toyota Center was there? Like what was the clientele like at night?
So we've always been very fortunate that Houstonians have always come from afar to come and eat. And still today, we still have a lot of people that come from Cyprus, come from Kingwood, you know. So it just wasn't as hectic on certain days. Like, you know, back in the day when the Rockets were playing well, we always had to plan for, you know, how many servers we need to have because it was going to be a really busy night. But our regulars would understand that and they would wait for a day when there wasn't an event going.
Gotcha. So it was still well accepted at night, which is really awesome to hear because during the day, it is lunch rush at China Garden is legendary, right? So many downtown businesses. You see people from all over. You mentioned so many members from city council, from HPD. They're all there. Lunch rush on a weekday is something to behold at China Garden.
Yes, before COVID. So currently now, post-COVID, we're only open one day a week for lunch, which is on Thursdays. It's hard to find help. That's an issue. Right after COVID, downtown wasn't fully back, and a lot of the employees weren't going to work or commuting to work, and they, you know, would be working from home. So a lot of the downtown people were not even in downtown. So we've always been debating when we should reopen fully for lunch, but can't get help.
And that was one of the things I want to talk to you about is, you know, most restaurants were hit hard by the pandemic, right? With the shutdowns, everything that's happened. But China Garden was hit twice because the lunch rush was so important to you. The downtown workers were such a big part of what made China Garden so huge during lunch. And then you add on top of that, there's no events at Toyota Center for such a long time. And even when it was opening back up, it was at such a small percentage. How did y'all navigate through that?
Well, we had to cut the excess spending, you know, cable, garbage pickup. So we just don't have a lot of labor because we don't have a lot of workers. Richard and Cameron and I do most of the work, and we have very quality people that are helping us, the few that we have. But I don't know how much longer it can be because we're all getting a little bit older and we were working harder than we ever have. So it's a challenge.
What would help change things? Is there anything that could help make it a little bit easier for you?
Just finding quality employees.
That's the biggest thing right now.
The biggest thing.
One of the good things about Toyota Center being right there is you've got so many events, right? And with Rockets games, with concerts, the list goes on and on. And as soon as you walk into China Garden, you just see a wall of famous people. So I need to know, like, who is the most famous person that has eaten dinner at China Garden?
Well, we've had several, but what comes to my mind is Dwight Howard.
Okay.
I'll never forget the first time he came to China Garden. And he was walking outside, and my niece's boyfriend happened to be outside, and he calls on the phone and says, "Hey, Dwight Howard's walking in." So I go bebopping outside, forgetting that he doesn't know who I am. And I'm like, I walk up to him, and I'm like, "Hey, how you doing?" And he's like, looks down at me, and he's like, "Fine." And then he keeps walking, and I go, "Oh, well, he didn't know who I am." So he's probably thinking I'm just a groupie that's, you know, trying to get his attention. So anyway, he walks into the restaurant. I follow him behind, and I go behind the register. And I said, "So, Dwight, what can we get you to eat?" He goes, "I don't know. What's good?" And I said, "Well, what do you like?" And he says, "I like the spare ribs. I like the General Tso's chicken." And so I said, "Why don't we fix you a Dwight Howard box?" And he goes, "What does that mean?" I said, "Everything you like, we're going to put in a box, and we're going to welcome you to Houston." And so he's like, "Cool." So the relationship started with that.
That is so cool.
It was really cool. And so following that, he would bring the team in, Isaiah Cannon, Troy Daniels. That team used to come in after practice very often. A side note, my husband and I were invited to go to one of Kobe's last games in LA. And we were flying home on the Rockets plane. And so Dwight Howard walks from behind and he puts his hand in front of my face. And I was like, whoa. He was basically just trying to say hi. And, he's a very sweet giant teddy bear. My mom loved him.
That is so awesome. Wait, you got invited to one of Kobe's last games. I've never heard this story. Tell me about that.
So my friend that used to work for Le Berge du Lac, his name is Kirk Hauser. He always was so nice to us and always thought of me because he thinks that I know everybody in Houston. So he said, hey, Carol, would you like to go to LA and stay at the Marina Del Rey and you get to hang out with the Rockets because I know you're a big Rockets fan and then you get to fly home on the Rockets plane. I'm like, well, that's a no-brainer. So we went to LA, watched the game, not knowing that was going to be, Kobe's one of his last games.
That is awesome. So if a CityCast listener who hasn't been to China Garden shows up and says, hey, what do you recommend? What are some must-try items for you?
Well, definitely the egg rolls. But I try to ask questions, okay? Well, with you and your hot mustard challenge back in the day.
Yep. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, let me tell them. So You have the best hot mustard in the city. It is so good, and their egg rolls are to die for. So we had a challenge back at a radio station where I was at, who could put the most hot mustard on an egg roll and eat it. And I was a little cavalier with it. Okay, I put like 2 tablespoons, it felt like, and my sinuses are still burning from it. So it is so good. It's like highly recommended. You got to get the egg rolls with the hot mustard.
Yes. Your eyes were watering too, by the way.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I would say the egg rolls, and then I would ask questions. Do you like sweet? Do you like spicy? Do you like vegetables? And then I could probably guide somebody as to what they might prefer. But I would say egg rolls, lemon chicken, Mongolian beef, and jalapeno shrimp are top 4.
Nice. Can't go wrong with those. I love it. It's so delicious. One last thing, being part of Houston history as the oldest Chinese restaurant, being part of the AAPI community as well, like you represent so much. What have you learned with your time at China Garden that the entire city could learn?
Love everybody the same. No matter what race, no matter what gender, no matter, you just got to love your neighbor and treat others as you want to be treated.
Perfectly said. Carol, thank you so much. Can't wait to see you soon and get those egg rolls cooking.
Thank you, Raheel. Great to see you too. I appreciate you.
That was Carol Churchill, partner at China Garden in downtown. You can learn more about them with the link in our show notes. Hey, are you enjoying our Food Wednesday shows? What other food topics would you like us to focus on? Send us a text or email with the information in our show notes. That will do it for today. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new.
My mom made friends with the police chief in Shreveport and actually taught my mom how to drive, and she was able to get her a driver's license because at that time, my daddy didn't want my mom to have a driver's license. Old school Chinese men.